Welcome back. So being able to say no and accept when someone else says no, it's not the easiest thing to do. So we asked Seattle author Nicole Tsong to walk us through how to set healthy boundaries and why it's so important. Welcome back to New Day, Nicole.
Thanks so much for having me, Abby.
It was so nice to have you here in person to talk about something that is really important but really hard for a lot of folks. And I think it's something we can all relate to, right?
Absolutely. I feel like boundaries is something that is perpetual challenge for most of us, and we have to keep growing and shifting around when to set them.
Exactly. It's when to set them. First we should know why it's important to set them, right?
Well, I find when we don't set boundaries, we tend to overgive. If you're a little bit of a people pleaser, we also sometimes can be a little bit rigid around boundaries. And when we don't have good ones, we actually have a harder time connecting with people we care about.
Yeah, I actually remember when I was talking with my mother about things and I had somebody say, hey, listen, you're setting strong boundaries with her, not to be a mean daughter, but to create a better relationship, which is what stuck with me. What is your personal connection to setting boundaries?
You know, I would say for myself, like I feel like there's a lot of expectations in life, and I've lived a pretty non-traditional pathway. Like I used to be a journalist, and then I was a yoga teacher, and now I'm a full-time work-life balance coach. And so going down these pathways that people aren't really expecting that from you, I had to set clear boundaries for myself around not needing other people's approval and really walking that pathway. Okay,
so there's like there's many layers to setting boundaries. First, there's the work-life balance boundary where you have to say, hey, I got to set boundaries with work and say, can't do this right now, it's after 6 p.m. But it's setting those emotional boundaries too, because I'm familiar with what you just said. I need approval. So how do you start that process with yourself?
Well, this is where it's so important, is starting to really understand for yourself what's important to you. So if you have a relationship, for example, that your family might not approve of, you would have to really be clear on that relationship is the most important priority for you. Or if you're, say, even simple things like moving away can actually create a lot of a rift in a family. So how do you start to actually just be clear on what it is that you care about?
How is it that you can continue to set healthy boundaries with the ones you love without feeling the concern that you're pushing them away?
Well, one of my favorite principles I teach my own clients is called I am and you are. And it's really starting to understand and acknowledge that you are your own individual with your own priorities and your own values. And while your family or other people in your life that you care about are super important, that you actually are the only person who can really set your own priorities. And once you're really clear on what that is, then you can just start to not need approval, but more just say, hey, this is what I'm doing, and be really clear in who you are and what you're doing.
Is that kind of the same premise you would use if someone were to say to you, hey, I'd like to set boundaries, but I'm afraid of confrontation?
Absolutely. I think people are afraid all the time, and I think of it less as confrontation and more being clear. If you're really clear on who you are and what you do, your family will just be like, oh, that's interesting, or people in your life will say, okay, that person really knows what they want, and really creating some more ease and flow in the relationship rather than having it to need to be that confrontation.
I'd like to go back to the conversation I was explaining to you that related to my mother and setting boundaries. I had a lot of guilt with that initially because this was the time when I was losing her, and I thought, wow, I wish I hadn't been so hard on her about these things. But is there a really important component on where we put guilt when we are dealing with setting boundaries?
It's very easy to feel guilty around setting boundaries, and really in that situation I always say you have to go back to what is your commitment and what's really important to you and what matters to you. And if you can really stay with that commitment, it becomes much easier to release the guilt and to remember there's nobody else who can actually lead your life and make choices for you except for yourself.
Yeah. So if someone is out there right now going, okay, this is great, I connect with a lot of these feelings, but I don't know where to start. How should someone go about starting to set those boundaries up, where they need to focus that in their life?
Well, first, I would say start to understand your own tendencies on boundaries. Are you someone who tends to set 0, or are you someone who's like, no, you can't enter at all? And so once you start to understand your own patterns with boundaries, then you can say, okay, is that actually working for me or not? And then see, right? And we saw a lot during the pandemic, a lot of people had no boundaries with work, and you say, okay, does that work for you? And you say, no. All right, now it's time for me to start to make a shift and make a difference in my boundaries.
Yeah. All right, let's take it to the other side of that. When we come across someone else's boundary and it's hard and we don't want to hear the word no, how do you kind of handle that?
That's such a good question. Well, when we are in a challenging situation like that, we have to start to understand for ourselves, like, what are our own boundaries, and understanding that, do you want your no to be respected? And if you do, you have to respect and honor other people's no. And so if you can really start to do that for yourself, it will help you when someone else is saying, hey, this is not the right time for me right now.
Is it different? Is it a different set of boundaries? Is it easier or harder when we're dealing with family versus, say, the workplace?
I feel like family is the most difficult place for all of us. I feel like it comes out in work, but really in family is the place where it's like the deepest, it's the most emotional, like you said. And the biggest place for many of us to start is actually also setting boundaries with ourselves. And this is something people, I think, don't think about too much. But are you taking care of yourself? Are you sleeping well? Are you getting off the scroll on your social media? And are you actually taking time to get connected and grounded? And the more you can have boundaries with yourself, the easier time you'll have starting to understand where you need to set them in your life, whether it's with your family or in your workplace.
Because if you don't set those boundaries right, then it is going to encroach on the things that you love and take time away from that, and then that's a whole nother side of guilt.
Exactly.
So when you're talking to someone as a life coach for work-life balance, is boundaries the most important thing you talk about? What are some of the other things you share?
Work-life balance, especially around boundaries, is so important. And then actually stress. I mean, for me, a lot of the big thing, and I work with women really on their purpose and finding what that next chapter in their life is. And when we're stressed, we have a very difficult time starting to access boundaries, starting to understand what it is we want to be doing with our life and our career and our relationships. So I would say boundaries is a huge part of it, because if you don't have boundaries, there can be an intense level of stress happening until you get clear. So boundaries is one piece of stress.
I have to say, I mean, it's so interesting that due to what we've all seen and the stress, that you have seen a niche that you can fill. And we're so grateful for your advice. We're so grateful for all this information you shared. And we will hopefully talk to you more again about this. Maybe we'll talk about limitations next time.
We can totally do that.
I love
that.
that.
That would be awesome.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole.